All right, awesome. Thanks everybody for joining us. Sorry we're running a few minutes late. Technical difficulties, probably user error, to be perfectly honest. It does happen. So awesome. I'm so psyched to have everybody. We're going to be talking about a subject that was sort of really interesting last week on the Millennial Think Tank. We talked about the collaborative economy. In particular, we dug into Uber and Lyft and transportation type platforms. This week we're going to kind of refocus a little bit and look at some of the infrastructure behind how the collaborative economy actually gets kicked off, or kind of gets going, or how people use it. So things a little bit more about things like about the labor that goes into it, and how the structure itself works. If you're new to the Millennial Think Tank, it's always great. We like to just introduce everybody really quickly. My name is Joe Cardillo. I'm one of the co-hosts here. Amy Tobin, who's our normal host, is out of town at the moment. And I work for our company, and also I have my own startup and do all sorts of other kinds of web analytics, content, technical tech type stuff. Sam, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm 24, so I'm a younger millennial, and I currently work in public interest research. And next weekend, I have my first art show that I'm selling goods. So I'm actually going to be like a commercial artist.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Congratulations. That's fantastic. Okay, Jeremy, go for it.
My name is Jeremy. I'm a young millennial too. I work marketing communications and Amadeus IT Group, so I'm excited to be here. It's my second
Cool.
show.
Awesome, and you're in Florida, Miami, right?
Yes, Miami, Florida.
Right, we got some good representation.
Yeah.
Helen, go for it.
Hi, I'm Helen, and I'm an older millennial, and I am a specialized strategist working in advertising. And I'm from Toronto, in Canada.
Cool, excellent. And then Albert?
Hi, my name is Albert. I work in high-tech product marketing, currently in Silicon Valley, but soon to be in Oregon.
Oh, can you guys hear Albert?
Oh, wait, can you hear me? No? Yes?
No,
Albert,
I can't.
we can hear you a little bit, but it's super low for some reason. Okay, we're going to let him work on that. So Albert's in San Francisco.
Oh, that'll work better now, right?
Oh,
Can
there
you
we
hear
go.
me?
Yeah,
All
we're
right,
good.
cool. So I had myself on mute. I'm sorry. I work in Silicon Valley. I'm a product marketer in the high-tech area, and I currently live in Silicon Valley, but I will be living in Southern California, in Orange County, by the beginning of next month.
Even warmer than where you're at now.
Yes, pretty much. And it's like 60 outside, I think.
Oh, excellent. That's not too bad.
Yeah, it's 57.
Cool. And then we'll have, yeah, that'll work. So we'll have a couple other people that are dropping in just a couple minutes late. Selena will be here, and Kelly should hop on. So when they get on, we'll have them just introduce themselves really quickly. So I wanted to start, Samantha and I were sort of like chatting online a little bit before this, and I wanted to start in a slightly different place. So last week we dug into Uber and Lyft, and we talked a little bit about safety, and we talked about kind of the decisions that go into using those platforms and what makes you actually want to use them or perhaps not use them. And I wondered, and if anybody's willing to break this down, just like their kind of mini thought pattern, that'd be really cool. But I sort of wondered, like, when you use a new app or a new service, what's your thought pattern like in terms of like, oh, I'm curious about this, and what you think of like, oh, should I, is there any kind of safety issue or concern or question if you can trust them? And I'm also curious if there's a difference between when you use like an app versus you use something where, there's like a weather app, for example, versus you use an app that actually connects you to somebody who does something, whether it's running a task or a car. I don't know, is anybody willing to sort of give us like your thought pattern when you try something new like that?
I can start, I guess.
Yeah,
You're asking about how I feel when I use new apps. I guess it's just, I see an app, it might look interesting, and I just download it. And, sometimes I see what other people say about it if, it's really popular on Facebook. If it's not, it's and I'm downloading it, I try to find some practical value in it. But usually I don't have any attachment to a particular app. It's just, is what it is. And if it's a good experience, then it's a good experience. If not, then, I move on. Because there's a bajillion apps out there, and my phone definitely cannot fit all of them.
Yeah. Is there
Apps
any
are disposable.
Is there any? That's the quote right there.
Yeah.
is there anything that makes you feel really good about using one versus one that makes you kind of go, that's a red flag?
Not particularly. I think apps are so nuanced that it's just like, you kind of have to see how it grows, see where it's applicable. There are apps that are here today, gone tomorrow, right? I feel like in the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of apps that have come out, or just companies. For example, right, Zynga. I mean, who gets Farmville invitations anymore? I do remember playing Farmville early on, and that was really, really, really fun. And now that we're just 2 to 3 years after that, no one talks about Farmville anymore. I don't get any Farmville invites. Right now, the app that I'm using a lot to play with other people is Trivia Crack, right? So I'm playing Amy, on trivia games right now and kind of having fun with that. And, that'll be hot today, and, in 3 months, no one will care. So, yeah. It's a very short attention span. And so I'll let someone else talk now, I think.
No, just to hop in there. I think some apps are more convenient to use than other ones. Obviously some have practical use. Like the Uber app, is very, very easy to use at first, and you do trust it a bit because you can text your driver, you can call your driver, kind of like more or less what's going on. But then there's also the fun apps that kind of inspire that social virality, like the Quiz Up. I use Quiz Up. What did you use, Albert?
I think it's called Trivia Crack.
Yeah, they're more like the same kind of thing. I'm guessing, but some inspire more social virality than the others, and these are the apps that are like here today and gone tomorrow. But definitely some of them are more practical than others, and usually those are the ones that kind of keep you in the stream and make things very convenient for you. That's why a lot of these apps, like the Airbnb app or the Uber app, whatever app, it's like sign in with your Facebook account. It kind of keeps everything in the stream, so you don't really have to go out there and apply to okay, let me fill out this form so I can sign up to use this app or whatever. I like how it keeps you in the stream, so that's really helpful for me.
Do you get a sense that there's do you get a sense of the person behind it, in part because you can stay in touch, so it makes it so easy to kind of check in with the driver and see what they're up to and where they're at?
Oh, I mean, definitely, especially when you can see them on the map and you know where they're going. I mean, there was one time I was in New York City just last week, and I had called an Uber, and I guess I had picked the wrong. I was still figuring out how to use it. But I was watching the driver, and I'm like, I'm not sure this guy's going to pick me up. He's definitely going the wrong way. So you could just easily let me cancel this and get another ride, So I thought that was really cool, really interesting, and it's convenient for me. I don't want to sit there not knowing whether my driver's coming or not. So, I mean, yeah, you can text your driver, you get to know him a little bit, so they have reviews. So I thought it was really, really cool.
Yeah.
Sam, do you use any apps that are like collaborative economy type apps? I know you're not big on Uber, obviously.
I have in the past. I do a lot that have to do with more like mental health sharing and things that are collaborative economies, but based on like wellness. But the thing is, I've done some dev work, and I've worked with dev groups before that I'm really hesitant about new apps that come out for the collaborative economy because I know the type of coding that goes on in there. I know that there's lines that are like, bracket, this is where I'm going to put something eventually, like question mark, loophole, 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 like end bracket. And things like that get into apps that make it a little bit interesting when you're looking at a collaborative economy, especially when you're looking at personalized information banking, that sort of thing, that I'm a little bit wary of. Which is a whole different side than what we're talking about, but that's right. Where the dev side comes out.
Well, that's part of that's part of the reason I wanted to start is because I was thinking about it, and I realized I was like, very little of the conversation that we had last week, because we dealt with trust and we talked a lot about kind of and Helen, if you want to give us your perspective on Uber, I think we're always open for that, of course. I know you got opinion. I know you got strong opinions. But there's this sense of if you're being totally realistic, it's almost the Craigslist problem, right? Where you're like, I don't know this person in any way, and yet this app or the platform that you're on is hopefully supposed to engender some sort of trust, right? It's supposed to be this sort of place where you can trust somebody.
You're also supposed to trust the developer too, which is an additional level which we don't usually get into when we're looking at collaborative economies.
Yeah, because that's hidden, right? That's sort of behind the, the interface is built by people, obviously, so that part of it exists too. And I guess it's there's this, I don't know if you guys have all used Craigslist, but I thought about that a lot too. Is with Craigslist, it's a cash economy. You don't really, I don't know if you feel like you can trust anybody you meet off of Craigslist. I think you can get a sort of a read on people, but it's it's a little more obvious if you're dealing with someone who's super sketchy versus someone who's on it, I think. Yeah. Well, so that was that part of it. I won't beat a dead horse or anything like that.
Well, I think it's interesting. I think that's kind of like the core of what the sharing economy is. It's sharing. So I mean, a lot of times it's another human being on the other end. It's not some huge corporation that's trying to sell you something. So I think it's an interesting idea. There's going to be a lot of trust that comes in. I mean, the way I see the sharing economy right now is it's still like in its infancy. It's kind of like where social media was like 10 years ago. We don't know where it's going to go yet. We know there's a lot left for it to go. So I think it's just going to be really interesting seeing where that goes and how it develops.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, so Albert, I know you just said that you've actually had a roommate who you met off of Craigslist. Like, what sort of things get you to trust somebody that you're going to be sharing space with, whether that's for 20 minutes in a cab or a roommate for a while or that sort of thing? Like, are there specific things that you sort of check in on to make sure that somebody's like worth being around or working with or whatever the case is?
I guess it's having the conversation on Craigslist. I mean, I haven't looked for a place in a while here, so who knows where this will go. Hopefully I'll be alive by the middle of next month. But, I would say that, like, it's conversation. It's, seeing if the place actually exists. It's, being safe like that. I think with regards to a cab, I don't know. I guess I just have that intrinsic trust of, Uber or something like that, just because it's an established company. I guess between Uber and Lyft and Sidecar, I don't really make a distinction. Although, I mean, given where Uber has been lately, right, I might be compelled to use it less just because of their ethical violations. And so, yeah, it's. I guess you're asking me to answer a question I hadn't really considered in some sense. Yeah, I mean, because I also don't know where else I'd go to go find places to live besides Craigslist that are that have as many people on them as they do. So there's that too.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Jeremy, so you're a more recent Uber user, is that right?
Yeah, I use it, when my car breaks down, like every once in a while to get to work. So, but like when I was traveling this last week was kind of like the first time I used it and depended on it, while I was traveling, So, but I think what helps with the trust is this whole like idea of like non-mediated messages. So it's kind of like the reviews that come from everything. I pay attention to that. I don't know if anybody else looks at that. And I think it helps like instill credibility and trust into what you're getting yourself into. So, I think that's kind of a big part of it. The trusting.
I want to jump in for a second actually because it's interesting because of the space in which I work, and I'm not saying that this is the case. This is not something that I've done, but I actually do find that one of the things that's really personally disturbing about the this current sort of sharing and openness and using apps is that we are more likely to trust other people than we are to trust, regulatory bodies, and that's okay. I understand the economics behind that. I understand the psychology behind that. But what I think is dangerous is that when we're looking at things like something as innocuous as Yelp, where you're just deciding where to go to eat for dinner, or something like Uber, and I have my own problems with Uber, is that these systems can be gamed, and these reviews can be purchased and manipulated. And I find that we have this sort of really, we won't trust, for instance, a bank and their app to do our banking over the phone. And Samantha makes a very good point with that. And we still have a lot of fear around banking online because our information is so readily available. But we are perfectly happy to look at the mass aggregation of feedback from a bunch of strangers, as opposed to the handful of people that we actually trust in real life, or looking to credible critics who have a vast experience and a large body of knowledge. We're more likely to look to a bunch of stars that have been aggregated by a bunch of masses, and that can be so easily manipulated. The mafia is incredibly well known. People are they have their reviews. They have bots that come in and storm them with bad reviews, and they don't pay up. When it comes to something like Uber, I think something that's really important to consider is that on the one hand, yes, taxis are sort of ruled by a municipal regulatory body, which really helps restrict this sort of notion of free enterprise. But on the other hand, and maybe this is just coming as a woman, it also means that they have a larger body to answer to. So, for instance, when it comes to something like UberX, I personally have a really tough time with the notion of going and getting into a car with someone who's not only a stranger, but someone who I can't really complain about should they try and do something to me later. And because Uber is a new agency, a new company, and they don't really respond to some of the larger municipal bodies that regular cabs have to, if one of these UberX drivers, or even a regular Uber driver, makes some kind of advance on me or makes me feel uncomfortable or drives me up to the middle of nowhere, Uber has demonstrated time and time again that if I complain about them, I'm shit out of luck. And so, again, the sharing economy is really fantastic in the fact that it gives people an opportunity to grow and to experiment and to disrupt the system and try new things. But on the other hand, there is very little consequence for when it goes horribly, horribly wrong. And just to tap into what Amy was saying, I do actually think reviews are a form of keeping people in check. I think it keeps Uber drivers in check to a degree. I think it keeps service in check in stores to a degree. It's not like a municipal, you can't go to complain to a larger body. But I think that when it comes down to it, a lot of these apps, which ultimately emerge from sort of the bro culture of current startup mentality, have demonstrated time and time again that they don't actually really care about you and your experience as a consumer. What they care about is making money. And that really bothers me. Like, it really bothers me because on the one hand, a big corporation screws you over, they're accountable to your dollar at the end of the day. If an app holder or design company screws you over, they can shrug their shoulders and say, well, that was just the individual who drove you. That was just the Airbnb that was hosting you. We're not responsible for that because we're legit and we're honest, but they were dirtbags. And that's where I think the problem comes from, is that there's very little onus that comes into it. It's a scary new world. And that's the end of my rant.
Yeah, I mean, so I wonder, like, you know, that like, okay, so reviews are this one piece, and I'd be curious to see, like, Sam, you sort of posted something in chat, like, I'd be curious to see how much weight you all think reviews really sort of hold, and then if reviews are not enough to regulate, which I kind of agree with you, Helen, I don't necessarily think that's really enough to count on, then what other things would you want to make sure exist? You know, should it be just like taxis, where there's a much deeper regulatory process? Is there some hybrid? And
I think it depends on the type of economy that you're looking at. So if we are looking at Uber in this case, like, I'm going to kind of expect the amount of safety that is necessary. I'm going to expect that amount of regulation. Just like, you know, if you're like a kid babysitter and you have like one of those babysitting courses, you're like a better choice usually than like some rando down the street. Like, most times people will be like, okay, like, you've got some certification. So I think, like, if it's low level risk, I don't think that it really needs a review board or like whatever. I can trust the community. If it is high level risk, I'm going to expect that there's something that's coming out there to help. Like, the fact that if maybe, like, just because I know Helen and I are talking from like a female perspective, but like, my safety is huge when I think about going as a single person into a car with another individual. That's a high level risk. It's low level risk for me to buy like a new type of eyeliner, and I can trust the community to like tell me which is the best kind of eyeliner there. But you're muted, Joe.
No, I know. Sorry, I was lost in thought.
If my tacos are crappy, oh well, my tacos were crappy. But, you know, like, there's so many incidents where, and especially like, and I'm using Uber as an example. The very first time I found out about UberX, I was like, are people insane? Like, do people think I'm actually going to get into a cab with some strange dude at 3 o'clock in the morning who doesn't have a license to do this, who I can't follow up on? And then within like 6 months, all these stories started coming out where women were like, they drove me out to a parking lot 2 hours away from my home. And they complained to Uber and they're like, oh, sorry, here's a $20 credit. It's like, and they've actually like gone on record as saying that they basically, they have no interest in reinforcing this. And I think that's the downside to sort of collaborative economies and sharing economies, is that it's like, at the end of the day, you have to trust that the developers and the CEOs are going to care about you, and ultimately they don't. Most of them are not that much better than the big corporations that everyone is so afraid of and hates so much. They're still out to make a buck, and they are perfectly happy to leave you with a $20 credit and a pat on the head.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it almost feels like, and I was just sort of thinking back to like Albert talking about, using an app and kind of, so I downloaded a weather app recently. I will admit to being like sort of a dinosaur and just Googling it every time I wanted to know for a while. And now I was like, all right, I'll download that. And there's so little risk to that, right? So the risk of a weather app, I guess, is probably it could be wrong. Not the end of the world for me. Also probably collect data on me, which I'm not necessarily super comfortable with, but again, that's not necessarily a big deal. But it's like, as soon as you go over to this place of, oh, there are other human beings involved that we can't really know for sure what they're going to do or how they're thinking, or we can't control their actions or behaviors, there seems like there's automatically, as soon as you go to that place, there's this like bigger element of like safety or danger or trust that comes up. And I don't mean to like belabor the point, except that those apps look very similar. Do you know what I mean? Like that part always sort of trips me up. Is like those things don't feel different when you're on your phone necessarily.
Well, and for the record, I just want to say, like, I think that most people are good people. And I've used Airbnb. I mean, I would never go to an Airbnb on my own. I'd always go if I was going with friends or like my partner. I mean, at the end of the day, like, I think most people are good, and that most people are just trying to get by and help out somebody else and make a buck. But I also do feel like there are some situations where, like at least as a woman, I feel like there are some things that go against all of my instincts and what I've been taught about preserving myself and my dignity. And in those particular cases, I go with my gut, and usually my gut says, "Wait for a yellow cab." Like, just using that as an example.
Well, what I think is pretty interesting too, and what Helen brought up was that she really cared about having like a CEO, or some sort of governing body of that, Uber, for example, really take care of like whoever, like that matters, whoever the patrons are. But that wouldn't necessarily be what a sharing economy is, right? Because I mean, a true sharing economy, is when an Uber driver can drive somebody around and receive 100% of the profit. So, would that whole trust factor be inherent in the sharing economy itself? So, if that's the direction we're going, will reviews be the only thing that can be our trust regulation for sharing economy? Like, I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing it out there. I think trust is just going to be an issue, an ongoing issue. I don't know what we can do to combat that other than just review.
Well, it's funny because it's like, so I was just thinking about Albert and Craigslist, and I've used Craigslist for years, right? For all sorts of things. It's mostly a cash economy in my experience. I've never, sort of dealt with bank, bounced checks from Nigeria, the Nigerian Prince scam, but I have a feeling that exists a ton on there, and of course they've moved on from there. But like when you think about like all those sort of micro interactions that people have, it's like, I don't necessarily know, and maybe this is to your point, Helen, like I don't necessarily know if I want the basis for being able to have somebody be responsible for my safety be if they can deal with social conventions, you know what I mean? Like they can pass as a regular, normal, easygoing person and then turn out to be like way off the wall for some reason. Like I don't necessarily want that masked behind an app where I don't know anything until I'm in the car with the driver or the person is already working on my project with my resume or whatever the thing is, there's something. I guess there's something about that. But the trust piece too. You're right, Jeremy. Is like I don't know. I think that the marketplace dynamic and sharing and renting and all that. Like I think the trust piece is not necessarily understood very well, particularly from a development side when you build out a platform. I don't think people are thinking about that as carefully as they
well, I think too, even on the consumer side, we're looking at it as, okay, I'm okay with not owning something as long as it's readily available to me when I need it, right? So I think that is more important to us right now than trust is in certain things, you know. I think it's still like it's a scale, you know. So I mean, I think that's why these apps, you know, and the sharing economy is going, you know, it's skyrocketing right now, especially in the transportation side of things, because you know it's convenient for us, you know. So we're taking the convenience and downsizing on the trust a little bit just because, you know, we see it as something, you know, more important for us right now. So, but I think the trust factor is gonna come up. You know, as more and more of these companies start popping up, I think the trust is gonna be the top of the news. You know, and it's gonna be the thing everybody talks about. Like, what else can we do other than just review? Because, you know, so many fake reviews come in. Like, what are you doing to filter the fake reviews? Even though you say you have these algorithms, these backend algorithms that filter these reviews, like, how do we know? You know, like, what's really going on, and how can we have more power? So, yeah.
I use Yelp as an example just because they're notorious for threatening business owners with, you know, comply, upgrade, do these things, or else we will swarm your page with bad reviews. Like and it's a shame too, because when I first started using Yelp, I loved it and I thought it was so easy, and they had this little thing. It was like an AR function called Monocle, where you could have a look around and it'd be like, okay, here's where all these restaurants are in the area, and here's all their ratings, and it used to be so great. But once I started finding out about how much of it was manipulated, and I think that to me is always something that I feel cautious about online, because you know, like even Google reviews can be manipulated and gamed, and I think it's something that most consumers are not aware of. I mean, it's black hat techniques, but a lot of marketers use them. And I think that people just don't understand, and they put so much trust into these things that are so easily purchased and manipulated. And
yeah. Do you guys think? I mean, I wonder. Do you think? Can you tell the difference? Do you think at least you can tell the difference between fake reviews and real reviews? Because that's a good point you raised, Helen.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, you can smell a fake review from like a mile away. And they're like, okay, so like anyone who works in marketing or communications can read someone's like, oh, I absolutely love this place and it's the best. And as soon as they're like, oh yeah, and like FYI, I'm not friends with the like people. I'm like, okay, well done, Mike.
It's so funny because a couple weeks ago I was working on a competitive analysis between, like, you know, different company like products. And I was going through like the non-media messages, like what the reviews are, you know, for each of these different products, and so many of them are the same like review, the same text, you know, and just like a different, like, you know, Twitter person or whatever mentioning this, and I'm like, oh man, come on, like, how much do they pay you, really, you know?
You know what the best part is? Okay, so wow, this is like, I love Gordon Ramsay. I absolutely love all of his shows. If you go to British UK's like UK Kitchen Nightmares, he goes to one in Wales, and he literally like pulls up all of their reviews, and he's like, these are the ones you wrote yourself. And he like literally like goes over, like, you've given fake reviews. How is anyone supposed to trust your food? And I'm like, that's it. Like, if I see fake reviews, done.
I should say, for anybody who's watching, a tip on how to spot a fake review or whether or not something is not correct is it's something that's rated. So when you look at a review, especially on apps, when you're on your phone, it will either have a very high rating or a very low rating. If it's around 3, it means that most of those reviews are actually fake. Because average people, when they go to rate something, they're often in a hurry. So they either go 5, I really like it, or 1, I really don't. And they often won't add a comment to it because they're in a rush. That's what average people do. The only time people either leave a comment is if they're really in love, they've really been burned, or they're a bot. And most of the time, those bots will put it in like a 4, and that averages it out to about a 3. So a 3, like a 2.5 to a 3, is usually actually something where they've purchased or manipulated most of their good reviews. Because most people go 1 or 5. So apps are either amazing or they're the worst ever.
Helen, what do you base that on? Where'd you get that data?
Based on behavioral economics and what I do for a living.
Could you share that data with us in the think tank?
You mean pull up the report?
Yeah, no, I'm just genuinely curious. I'd like to look at it.
I maybe shouldn't have brought that up then, because technically I cannot.
Oh.
I can talk about it. But yeah, it's basically most people rarely put that much thought into their reviews. When it comes to things like Yelp, because they often access it through a desktop, like Amazon, when they're typing, they will put in more pertinent, more thoughtful reviews. But when it comes to apps, and we're giving 1 to 5 star ratings, most people pick 1 or 5.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I did not know that. I mean, I knew that the reviews were being gamed, so that doesn't surprise me. But I didn't realize that middle ground was so like useless, essentially. Because although right, if things are filtering up, kind of like when I go to the Play Store, I'm never even going to see a 3-star app. Let's be totally honest. I'm either looking for the top 5 apps that do something or that connect me to someone that are really well rated, or I'm just curious about let's put it bluntly, the shit shows, the wrecks. So I never really look at average rated stuff. Kieran, I think Kieran barely needs an introduction at this point. He's kind of like an institution in the millennial think tank, but maybe just tell people, the basic spiel. And then I wonder if you use reviews or you pay attention to them or if you leave them at all?
Yeah, well, I'm Kieran. I'm a college student. And I can also say that I don't really read a lot of reviews, but whenever I read a review, I'll read a review about sugar-free gummy bears on Amazon that cause horrible diarrhea. It's something that George Takei shared in my Facebook, and I was like, whoa, that's a really great Amazon review. I've even written some absurd reviews before because I think it's silly. It's like a new art form. It's like if you were able to go to Walmart and stand by all the crap that they sell and tell people, the truth about it. But, I mean, other than that, I don't really leave stars. I don't really care what other people have to say that much because, there's no regulation of who's saying what, and there's no real way to interpret, whether or not the people are competent enough to be making these statements in the first place. I prefer first-hand accounts of products, but then, again, I don't really, buy a lot of products or think about things that much, I guess I'm pretty simple in that regard. But I know that a lot of people, when they're going to buy a new electronic device, they'll go and they'll do this research, and they'll research it for months, the best price and the best product and what everyone has to say about it. And, truthfully, I have never gotten a product online and thought to myself that what I read in a review really resonated with how I felt about that product.
Yeah, the thing that occurred to me too, which is kind of curious, is like as we start to sort of like see like all these different people just toss reviews onto a product or a collaborative platform. Just kind of, a lot of times it seems like it's random, right? You get a whole string of like faceless avatars, etc. But there's all sorts of like questions about identity too, right? Because if you go back and look at like if I'm picking a designer or I'm picking a freelance writer or I want someone to clean my house or whatever the collaborative economy aspect is, like there has to be some assurance of that person's identity that they might not just completely disappear. I think that's that trust piece. Like if you don't have that, it seems like it's hard to know what you would have, which is frustrating and weird, I think, at times too.
Well, there's so many cases within the online review world where it's like you have to physically take a picture of yourself or yourself interacting with the product to like actually demonstrate that they're there. And I've been in cases where I've seen people demand accountability to like, I need you to take a picture of yourself with your face and this, and it has to match up to your avatar, and then like tell me if there's a jersey in this background that matches the state that you're in so that I can tell that you like cheer for this team. Like that's the extent that some people will go. And I think that there's a really interesting piece of trust there. Like, why do we take so much interest with trusting some things and not other things? What are the things that we trust uniquely, and what do we as like digital natives like inherently distrust?
I have a question because a couple people said earlier that like I noticed that the sharing economy and the collaborative economy were sort of used like interchangeably, and this is just a curiosity, but like so assumably the sharing economy is maybe there's lots of stuff like peers where there's not like money changing hand exactly, right? Versus collaborative economy where you're paying a driver or you're paying someone to clean your house or do a task. But do you guys have any like feelings about whether you trust people who are not doing it for money more or less, or do you feel like the two are actually different?
Are there actually people who don't like share their car and drive an Uber for money, or what are you getting at there?
Yeah, there are people that the sharing economy, like strictly, there are
Right.
people that share lots of things but don't. There's no cash involved.
Mm-hmm.
No, there's no money changing hands. It's just kind of like the goodwill or the social capital side of it.
I mean, I felt like that was happening before we were coining these terms and whatnot, right?
I mean,
Maybe I'm
Craigslist.
wrong.
No,
Mhm.
Craigslist. That's part of what I thought of it. Is that Craigslist? That's part of Craigslist, and it has been for years and years. Like the free section on Craigslist where people will be like, "Yeah, I got a bunch of extra diapers if somebody's really like needs help and they've got a kid. Like, here you go." Like, and that feels like implicitly like you would trust that person more than you might somebody who's selling you something for $10. I don't know, Sam. I saw you shaking your head or nodding earlier. What was your?
So like I think that if you're not exchanging goods, then I'm going to be like, well, you don't have any like inherent reason to do this. Like you're not being paid to tell me if you don't like this or you do like something. But I mean, I know a bunch of people who've played like freebie roulette on like Kijiji, which is the Craigslist of Canada. And like literally they'll be like, yeah, I scored a bunch of free stuff and I've also had really sketchy meetups. So I mean like then you get into that whole dichotomy too. I mean, I'm probably gonna trust someone who has no stake in it than comparatively to someone who's getting a rating based on the interaction.
Does anybody else feel like there's a difference between whether there's cash exchanged or it's just out of goodwill?
Well, I mean, I think I would definitely trust somebody who, just going back. There was a study that I read up back in, I forgot back in when, where they had actually it was a perfume study. So they had the same perfume, but they had one bottle for $3 and then one bottle for like $36. And it's same perfume, but everybody kept buying the $36 bottle, because you don't want to buy the $3 bottle of perfume. So I thought that was really interesting, and I think it's a great example. Is would you trust like the same? I don't know. I don't know if I would feel that confident. Just getting something totally free. I'd rather have this exchange going on where I'm giving something and he's giving something, and I just feel more. I feel more confidence in the exchange. I feel more trust in the exchange. I feel that there's there's some bartering going on, but to get something totally free with nothing on his part, I just feel is a little different. Like I know people who have done it, but it just feels weird to me.
Albert, what do you think? Because I mean, that goes back to Craigslist a little bit, right? It's like part of what's great about Craigslist is if you navigate it correctly, and maybe, I don't know, tell me if you feel this way or differently, but if you navigate Craigslist correctly, you get more than money out of it. You get this like chance to actually have a good connection with people. Does that?
I feel like you get a lot of really interesting conversations off Craigslist. So, I'm trying to move down to Orange County in Southern California right now, and in my listing, I indicate that I currently live in Northern California and would like to move to Southern California and find a unit. And I have a lot of people who, respond to me and are like, "Oh yeah, I used to live up where you live now too, and we moved down, 2-3 years ago, and so you come out and maybe we can like house you for a little bit, that kind of thing, right? So you do get that, you get these really nice like relationships with people. The person that I moved in with back right when I graduated from college, I've been living there for 4 years and about, I would say, 4 months now, and I'm just coming up to the final week over there. But yeah, I mean it's pretty amazing over there because we've become friends and we relate on a lot of topics. We talk, and I mean, that's really cool. I mean, I haven't really sold anything else off, Craigslist or bought anything else, but so far my rooming situation has been overwhelmingly positive, and I consider myself very lucky. Yeah.
I wonder. So, like I think the thing that's really interesting there too is like, and maybe Sam, we talked about this a little bit, but like, and I love the way that you called it like. So Samantha and I were chatting about it, and we were thinking about like how the collaborative economy is positioned as this thing where it's like, get the things you want and need, and other people can provide them. And it feels really good. It feels like this kind of like convergence of neo-hippies and capitalism, and everybody feels awesome. Like, is that even possible, or is there some kind of like weird like straw man set up there, do you think?
For what it's worth, I mean, I realize it's probably one of the most vocal things of the conversation, that it appears that I wouldn't believe that, but I actually do. I mean, I do think that ownership of most things is largely unnecessary. I mean, I realize I'm surrounded by a bunch of folks, haven't or not. But it's like, I don't own a car. I use auto share. Which, I mean, to a certain degree is also based. What am I saying? Oh, okay, never mind. So I mean, that in a certain degree is also based on a certain degree of trust, and that the car before you is going to leave it in good condition, is going to fill it up with gas, and so on. But again, you can also call auto share and complain if they don't. I don't really have much of an interest in owning a home, although my friends and I have talked about, because home ownership in Toronto is so expensive, about buying a house together and converting it into 2 floors. You know, one of these days I'd love to own like a cottage, a small cottage, but again, I also realize I can't do that. So, you know, a couple of the guys that I know and I have discussed, you know, going in to purchase a cottage together and working out like essentially a privately owned timeshare between, like, you know, because us, you know, we'd probably want to go to the cottage anyway together, so why not just share it and talk with each other? I personally think that we live in a world where we are driven by this notion of the things that we need to purchase, and frankly, most of those things we don't really need. We just have bought into this idea that we do. So I do like the idea that together we can purchase something and get the best out of it, or that, you know, you can look into services where I just
Well, somebody needs to mute themselves, or I shall mute them. There we go. Sorry, Helen, you were saying.
No, it's okay. It's my ADD kicking in. I get really easily distracted. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that it's a challenge, and it's in its infancy, and I think that, you know, it's something that we're all trying to negotiate. But I would much rather share with several people that I know, and you know, from services that I mean, like something like auto share, I trust, because again, I'm driving myself from A to B. I don't have to depend on someone else.
I think what you're talking about is like a co-op, you know, like a farming cooperative or a housing cooperative, and they have those on, you know, on a lot of local levels. I know.
I'm a dirty hippie, really.
Yeah, well, no, but yes. I mean, I talked to my grandmother a lot, my nana, and she grew up in Italy, you know, right, you know, through the 50s, and they were still recovering from the war. And the town that she lived in is this little town called Montalbano on the Adriatic coast, and in the town there was one oven in the center of town. There was one water fountain. And the women, you know, there were a couple women who would go out there each week, and they would bake the bread, and other women would make roasts, and they would make sausages, and they all shared the same equipment because nobody had kitchens in their home. It was unthinkable. And I think that, you know, this model really can be, you know, taken to new levels. And not just out of necessity, but out of choice. You know, as Helen is talking about here, if you get enough like-minded people together, you know, who want to share communal property, you know, it's a co-op. I mean, a lot of people are probably part of farming cooperatives already. I mean, I'm sure Joe is. I mean, you know, living in New Mexico, and I know that Samantha already talked about the cooperative with the taxi company or whatever. And I think that the internet and all of this, you know, collaborative economy that we're referring to is just a really large scale version of this basic cooperative idea that, you know, someone out there can have a need And we as members of that same community who can emphasize with that need are able to provide for that person in hope that if we were in a similar situation, that other people in that community would provide for us. And it's a matter of turning, creating this sense of community where a sense of community might not have ever been there. And even if there was that sense of community in the past, it's about making that community real.
I mean, wow, that really digs in deep. And I think, I think part of okay, so like I'm sure everybody here probably in their head at least a little bit, and maybe by a show of hands, how many people when they hear like sharing economy or collaborative economy kind of smirk a little bit, like, yeah, okay, that's not something new, right? Is that anybody else in that category? Is that just me? Okay, we got a couple. Helen says yes. No, because I mean the bartering thing, right? And so that's what I was like thinking about earlier when Albert was talking about like having kind of met people he actually lives with off of Craigslist, and I've done that too. It's like I don't necessarily see capitalism as this thing that's like completely evil, but I also don't think that this single serve like lifestyle where everybody has everything all the time completely on demand, I just don't think that feels very good to people. Like I don't think people really care about that like as the only way to live or to cooperate. So to me that's like I think the collaborative economy is to your point, Kieran, is just expressing like a desire for community in a lot of ways or collaboration,
Well,
and the other thing is, I'm sorry, I just need to say this real quick. The other thing about a collaborative economy is that it doesn't always have to be about financial enrichment. It's more about prestige than anything else. And it's really it kind of ties into this different mode of human behavior in which it doesn't always have to be a financial gain that we're looking for, but it's another type of fulfillment that we're looking for, namely being part of that group. Which is why, us liberal, hippie, tree-hugging folk feel the need to be a part of this sort of cooperative community because we need that sense of family, that sense of community, that sense of shared values in order to, affirm our own belief system.
Okay. Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought it just kind of like spaced out there for a second. No, what I thought was really interesting too about Joe, are you muted or am I muted? Hello?
No, you're good.
Okay, I'm good. Okay. What I thought was really interesting about the sharing economy was that it gives us options, and I guess that's why the sharing economy, like Uber and Airbnb, have found itself in these constant PR struggles with corporations, because they're threatening market share. So. I think in that aspect, I like having options. I like kind of having both, whether it's somebody who has something that can make available for me, or me purchasing something from a big company. I like both of them. I don't want one or the other in particular, but I definitely like having the option.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's part of like the mindset problem around the collaborative economy. It's sort of like this, like world domination. It's like I don't really necessarily think that Uber should be completely in charge of all transportation ever. And heck, as soon as cars get totally outmoded, gonna happen, people. It'll be a little while, but it's gonna happen. Uber might not even exist unless they're moving into that market. So I don't know. I sort of think it's like, and some of you know me a little more. I get kind of geeked out thinking about ecosystems. And ecosystems are a lot less about causality and more about correlation. And it's like something really healthy has to exist for a community to be happy and for people to really work well together. You can't force them all to do exactly what you think is going to make them happy or is going to work for them, And so that flexibility and options, like you said, Jeremy, is I don't think you can remove that from the equation when you're talking about collaborative economy. It's like this much bigger human idea. All right. Any other thoughts on that aspect? Because I have one final question, but I just wanted to check in. Anybody else have any burning desires or questions to address? Nope. Happy group. So I think because we just have a few minutes left, I kind of wanted to ask, like, and there's a whole bunch of other questions that I have about like the infrastructure that goes into these things, and like I'm sure a lot of you have worked a lot. I mean, like, let's be honest. A lot of us actually kind of are in the collaborative economy. Albert, I know you're sort of in that segment, right? You've done contract work. Sam, you've probably done contract work. I've done contract work too. Like, do you really, you know, going back to that question of like, is it just a little bit of like PR, you know, in terms of how they call this the collaborative economy, the sharing economy? Like, do you conceive of it in that way, or do you just sort of like think about it as this is just the way it's always been, or do you feel like there's a split, I guess I'm asking, between this collaborative economy and like some old way of doing it?
I mean, I mentioned in our conversation that it's a sheep in a different sheep's clothing. And like the concept is that like we try to like look at this as it's completely reinventing the wheel collaborative economies, but it's really just looking at a different form of like exchange based on the same principles of getting goods and people selling. So I mean, it's to me it's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like we've reinvented the wheel, but it still looks like a wheel, and it looks and it sounds like a wheel, and it's shaped like a wheel. So.
Yeah, what I think is really interesting too, just jumping on that, I think you know, to Samantha's point, she's definitely right too. Like it's just opening up new revenue channels. So you know, I've also done a lot of research on B2C companies who have actually turned into a B2B concept. You know, which is really interesting because I mean, some of like I think having this collaborative economy like kind of like concept is great for, you know, some companies who might not be as big as bigger companies. And, you know, what they can do is pretty much join them if you can't beat them, you know? So I have seen, you know, some of these companies turn their whole, like, product into kind of like a widget or app to be included in these bigger company websites. So, you know, and they kind of, it's collaborating, it's partnership. So it's not just exclusive for startups like, you know, Uber or Airbnb. But there's also in the B2B and B2C world, where with established and emerging companies, they're also changing their concepts up and just thinking about partnership, like what they do well and how it fits into the greater scheme of things. So I think that's great. Yeah.
Anyone else have any like feelings as to whether the collaborative economy is this new thing versus just having been this kind of older thing that exists, like in a different form? Because I have an opinion, but I'm going to wait until. Nope. I don't know. I guess like because in chat we're talking about bartering, right? Which is really sort of interesting to me, and I feel like, you know, I feel like that part of the problem is there's this mythology around the collaborative economy about how, you know, the exact right person will be available to do the exact right thing for you at the right time, and it sort of feels like that actually doesn't happen a whole lot, but when it does, it feels like kind of feels magical. So I don't know. That's sort of my take on it, but I don't know that that's something totally. Like I do think technology enables that, but I don't know that that's something that like that exists on as broad a worldwide scale as usual. Because I think that community thing that Kieran was talking about is really critical. So it has to be like people around you or with you having that experience. All right. Any other opinions? I just killed the conversation. Good job. All right, we can wrap it up. Thanks for joining us. Sorry about the technical difficulties. If you guys want to hang out and talk for another couple minutes, let's do that. To everybody viewing, thanks so much for hanging out with us. Lots of really interesting things that we dig in. We do a Sunday recap every week, so that post will come out on our company's site. And then I believe next week we're talking about, I think we're looking a little bit like around how millennials are sort of being part of that infrastructure, that work infrastructure for the collaborative economy, and some stuff around work and remote work and that sort of thing. So we'll sign off here and see you next week.
Sayonara.